Hello, everybody, and welcome to this, our first webinar in the Practitioner series. And a quick reminder, you do need to attend 4 webinars. Now, I appreciate that it may not be possible for you to attend webinars in person. It's wonderful if you can, that would be fantastic, but it might not be possible. And so everything is going to be recorded, and you can come in, you can view the recording and comment that way. But you do need to do it because it's part of your certification process, and the Curator Learning Record will record your participation, whether you live or looking at the recording or both. But it's part of it, and you need to have attended 4 of the webinars. So welcome. And Agile project management. So first of all, well, why have I chosen Agile? Well, simply because a lot of people ask about it. So we'll look at that today, but in future, it can be on different topics. Please feel free to suggest different topics. I'm very happy to help if I can. So, suggest away and I will see what I can do. All right, so Agile project management. It's, I suppose, you always think, well, what's the opposite? Where does it come from? What are the alternatives? And I think that Agile is most commonly associated with software project management, software development and things like that. And I think the background was that some practitioners felt frustrated that many projects were being delayed, they're under-delivering, and so on. And so they said, well, the way to maybe fix this is to have a very clear and tight focus on time. So if you think about the triple constraint, what Agile focuses on is you fix time and then you adjust scope and cost to fit the time. So that in its essence is what it's about. Now, what I'm not going to do is give a big overview and lots of time on sprints and scrums and product owners and backlogs, because first of all, there's a fair amount of both reading and videos covering that on the course already, and you may well already know some of it. But what I'm trying to do is give an overview of how I think it can be applied to our sector, because that's sort of really what matters for us. But I do want to stress it's my perspective, and I would love to hear other perspectives as well. Okay, so let's get going. And think, wow, what happened in 2020? Fires, wars, plagues. It's like the apocalypse, really, and a very difficult year. And people are always wise after the event and say, oh, we should have predicted this, we could have done that. Well, I don't remember anybody really predicting COVID. At least not at a practical level. I'm quite sure that there are senior medical people who've been worrying about pandemics. But I mean, you think about your projects, your programs. I mean, was anybody in your organization thinking about the effect of a pandemic? And so it is really hard to predict. I mean, let's be blunt and honest about this. And this is why I want to start looking at Agile by thinking about risk management, which is a bit strange, really. What does this mean? Agile project management, risk management? Well, as we'll go on to see, look at 2021. Now, this is, I think, quite an interesting graphic. Now, it is global, it is generic, and it is, I don't know how many different respondents they've got, but these are seen as short-term risks. Infectious disease. Okay, well, we know a lot more about that now, but interesting that livelihood crisis is quite high. Weather getting more extreme, as where I'm speaking to you from in the UK, where we're in the middle of April and it was snowing this morning. So, yeah, extreme weather. And then we've got cybersecurity, digital inequalities. It's quite interesting, actually. And it's worth thinking about your projects and have you considered these, to what extent, whether that's at a project, program, country team, organization level, it doesn't matter. Look at some of this, and it's actually quite hard. I mean, all right, this is a risk, but it's quite a big generic risk. I mean, we talk about, I don't know, prolonged stagnation. Yeah, we can sort of get it. It's a high level generic risk, but what can we do about that? This is where I think Agile, it can be quite helpful. All right, so let's think about COVID. But I mean, we could take any of these. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter which one of the risks. What does it mean for your work over the next 12 months? Well, with COVID, we've probably got something of an idea because we've been living with it for a year now, more or less. But you think about those on the previous graphic, and you think about the different risks over the next couple of years. This can be quite a difficult question to answer. What does it mean? Does it mean delays? Does it mean less funding? Does it mean there's going to be different funding? What's going to happen with COVID? I mean, we don't know. I mean, we see some countries, it's going down. In other countries, it's still skyrocketing. Well, what does the COVID world look like in 6 months? Oh, I don't know. So some of these risk questions are really quite hard to answer in a way that's concrete and helpful for your day-to-day work on the ground. All right, and whatever we say, you've then got the question, well, how do we know? How do we know what we've got a bit of evidence, a bit of guessing, maybe we read something, spoken to somebody, but it's pretty high level. I mean, it's not detailed, it's not very well grounded, there's a lot of guessing. It's our best guess, yeah, okay, but we're still guessing. It's very difficult, to have concrete, grounded estimates for the future. None of us have a crystal ball. We can't predict the future. And I think the challenge is that we're looking at it at this very high level. We're looking at it at, we might be, prolonged stagnation of the economy, or extreme weather events, or COVID. And it's very difficult to do this. It's because it's high level and it's long term. What might happen in 12 months? I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen next week. And for those of you working in emergencies already, you know this. I mean, I was talking to a gentleman who was managing a hospital in Syria, and he said his idea of long term was the next day. So looking over 12 months is really difficult. Okay. And the tools, well, if we know it's going to be difficult, these aren't going to be very helpful. Here's a risk register. You know this, you've seen it, because it's just going to be so high level. So what are we going to do? All right. Well, the tools can help us, because what we're trying to do in risk management is answer a question of what might go wrong. But the challenge is, if we look at it over 12 months, what might go wrong over 12 months, then it's a very, very difficult question to answer. It's high level, it's quite, it can be almost like wishy-washy. It's well, and then we just, well, we talked about it, but we can't really do anything, and that doesn't help. So what we can do is we can change the question. We can say, well, we can't really answer the question of what might go wrong over 12 months. I mean, we can have a conversation, of course we can, but we can ask a question of what might go wrong in the next 2 weeks. And I say 2 weeks, it could be next week or the next month. It doesn't really matter, but it's a much shorter schedule. And that's what we're looking at here. And you can ask and answer this question, and it's much easier. You could use a risk register or whatever tool you wanted, because it's closer in time, and that's simply makes it easier. There's more information, we have a better idea. So a way we can manage risk in these circumstances is just to shorten the cycle. If you're doing a big emergency response, trying to do a risk register over a year is probably not that helpful. I mean, there might be some elements which are. However, doing one over the next week or 2 weeks, or if you're at the beginning of a big rapid onset emergency for the next couple of days, it becomes possible. Perfect? No, of course not. But because it allows you to ask a different question, what might go wrong over 2 days, 2 weeks, or whatever, then we can have a much better conversation. And as some of you have heard me say before, a lot of project management is just the right people having the right conversation at the right time and in the right way. So by shortening down the cycle, here we've got plan, manage, review, but we're doing it over 2 weeks or whatever. And then we can revise our risks at the end. And what we are doing here is effectively a form of agile project management. And that's why I wanted to come at Agile from this perspective of risk management, because I think you can see it's just not really helpful to look at what's the impact, what might be the impact of COVID over 12 months or 2 years or whatever, but actually over 2 weeks, okay, I can see these are the things that might go wrong in my project over the next 2 weeks. And so we can actually see very clearly, I think, that by shortening the cycle, it gives us a lot more control. And that's what Agile is trying to do. It's trying to shorten the cycle, focus on time, and that is by far the most important aspect of Agile. It's having a clear and short time box to do work in. All right, so what could that look like for us? What could this plan, manage, review look like if we're looking or thinking about project management more broadly? Well, within Project Deep Pro, you see stages, right? Which is great. We know. So we know we have stages, and it says in there that a stage can be pretty much whatever you want it to be. It might be a quarter. It might be 2 weeks. Well, whatever it is. But again, it's the idea. Break it down. And again, doing, you've all seen project plans that make you lose the will to live because they're so long, they're huge, they're cumbersome, and they're probably wrong on the day that they are actually developed. Well, that's not really very helpful. So again, we've got rolling wave planning. Okay, so you can have your high level plan. Okay, got that. And that clearly that needs to link to a logical framework or a results framework or whatever we're using. Okay, great, good, got that. But then we need something that's going to help the implementers. Because if a plan doesn't help the implementers to implement, it's not a very good plan. And now, if I say my stage is 2 or 3 months, it's closer in time. It becomes much easier to do a much more detailed plan. And it's going to be detailed and comprehensive because it's closer. I've got more information. You think about it, it's nothing to do with work, it's to do with life. You can plan what you're going to do in the next couple of months with much greater accuracy than what you're going to do over the next couple of years. So it's just the same. And then we can see that many of the tools that we know and already use can be used here. So for example, here you sort of see what we're doing in the stage, we're listing out a number of deliverables. And I was saying, okay, well, for each one of these, I can do a work breakdown structure. But my work breakdown structure is focusing on the deliverables. It's not focusing on outcomes, outputs. It's focusing on the concrete deliverables in the stage, the next 2 or 3 months or whatever it is. And at the end of it, I've got a decision gate. So to some extent, This as a mechanism for implementing rolling wave planning is reflecting Agile principles. You could say if you're doing a big emergency response, our stage is going to be, stage one is going to be a week, and we're going to have a few deliverables around recruitment, checking in with the authorities, checking in on staff, checking in with headquarters, doing all of the initial procurement, or whatever it is, I'm making it up. And then you can break those down, do a work breakdown structure. If necessary, you could do a network diagram, you could do a Gantt chart. You're not dealing with too much information, so it makes the tools much lighter, much easier to use. I mean, when you see some Gantt charts and you see like there are like 250 lines in it, and you just lose the will to live, and it's not going to help anybody, except maybe the senior managers, because they feel, oh yes, we've got a Gantt chart, but it doesn't help anybody because it's too big, too complex. So again, just by breaking down, we make it easier. Okay, now you will have noticed that we've also got a decision gate. Well, if you've got a decision gate at the end and the beginning of every stage, it gives us a framework for control. We can look at how we've done and did it go well? Do we need to make any adjustments? Do we have a plan for the next period, for the next stage? And yes, we do. And we all agree it. We're all on the same page. Okay, get going. So again, it makes it quite easy to link our control framework to our rolling wave approach. And this also means that if there are any issues, so let's say there have been significant delays, you've actually got a mechanism for talking about this with your governance structure fairly quickly and not 2 weeks before the end of the project. So we've got some Agile principles in here where we are breaking things down. We are focusing on time. Okay, but I think we can do some more as well. So one of the things that we can look at here is, and we start to get some terminology here. So what I've called it, instead of a stage, I've called it, well, its term is a sprint, but it can be whatever you want to call it, frankly. But a sprint is the typical term that's used in Agile project management. And a sprint is usually 1 or 2 weeks. What I find is if it's longer than that, it doesn't really work. It becomes more like business as usual. So you could take your stage and you could break it down into sprints. And again, it's the same thing, 2 weeks, 1 week, whatever is appropriate. And once you do this, you can start to say, well, okay, we've now focused even more on time, and then we focus on the deliverable. So what do we need to get done in the next 2 weeks? Who's going to do it? We've got tools like a racing matrix can help you. And there are specific tools such as Trello, and you can see a picture of a Trello board. Here it is on the screen, which make it very easy to manage this. You've just got lists of cards. It's a little bit like a very old-fashioned cork notice board with lists on it and sticky notes. And you can just move them across from to do to doing or done or whatever. And it's easy, and it's all online so everybody can see it. And then we've got check-ins. Now you can have a check-in at the beginning and the end. That's a good idea, especially when you learn how you've actually done. So if you said you were going to achieve 10 tasks as a team, and you've realized you've actually achieved 5 tasks, and then in the next sprint, you think you're going to do 10 tasks and you achieve 6 tasks. Well, this is telling you something. This is telling you that you are overestimating your ability to get work done. And so within a couple of sprints, you can start to say, well, actually, if you don't make some changes, you are going to have a delay. So you can then have a conversation with your governance structure and say, look, this is happening. We need more resource, or we need to modify the scope. Again, we've got this big focus on time. It's already telling us that if we carry on like this, we're going to have a problem. Or maybe you see that you've allocated 2 tasks to each person. You've got 5 people in the team. 4 people do the task, 1 person doesn't. And it happens again. So, all right, you can have a chat. Is there a problem? And maybe that they don't really understand what they need to be doing, or maybe that they're given other priorities. You know, how many times have we seen that, where you think that somebody's working on your team, but they've got a matrix manager giving them a load more work? All right, then you can have a conversation with the person's manager, with your governance structure, but because the problem is not going to sort itself out. You know, there is no magic, there is no Harry Potter School of Project Management. So again, this very compressed cycle of 1 or 2 weeks allows us to do this, because we can have a check-in, we can learn from it, and we can get much better estimates really very quickly. Now, you can also have more frequent check-ins, and you sometimes see sprints where a check-in might be maximum 10 minutes or 15 minutes, but it could be every day or every other day. And you're not doing a review, you're not doing a progress review. No, you know, that's not about that. The assumption is if you don't say anything, it's going well. But your 10 or 15-minute meeting is focusing on any blockers. Is anything getting in the way? Is anything stopping you from delivering? Well, again, if there is a problem, you want to know about it quickly as a project manager, not at the end of even a stage of 2 or 3 months. You want to know about it immediately. So what this approach is giving you, what it can give you, is a lot more control and a lot more quickly. Okay, so again, just some ideas about how Agile can be applied through stages, breaking things down, focusing on time, and then breaking the stage down into sprints. And of course, then the question is, well, how long is a stage? How long is a sprint? To which the answer is, well, as long as you want them to be. But in my experience, as I said, I think that if a stage is longer than 3 months, it can become a bit messy. And if a sprint is longer than 2 weeks, the same is true. So my suggestion is keep stages to a quarter as a maximum and sprints to 2 weeks. Now, if you wanted a sprint to be over 2 days, because it's, you know, the first couple of days of a major emergency, fine, no problem at all. And, you know, before people say, oh, we never have time to plan, I think, you know, in an emergency, well, very often it's because when we think of planning, we think about a massive extractive process that's about as appealing as having a tooth removed without anesthetic, was actually sitting down and saying, okay, what are our deliverables in the next 3 days? What do we next? Okay, who's going to do them? All right, if we want to do this, what else needs to happen? Actually, you can do that in 20 or 30 minutes. And we can always make time for 20 or 30 minutes. Okay, so those are just some thoughts on Agile project management, taking a strange route in through risk management, but one that I hope was helpful. And then this is a good chance to see if there are any questions. And I've had one question sent to me, which is around, well, do I know anybody who's doing this? And I think, well, I know people are doing elements of it. And just to tell you a quick story, I'm supporting and coaching some project managers who are working in India. And, you know, their problem was that the plans were messy. They were both too big, but also not helpful. There were delays. Information wasn't clear, and it was getting a bit acrimonious. You know, the NGO's blaming the partner's blaming the NGO, everyone was blaming the donor, not a very productive way of working. So we said, okay, all right, it is changing, and COVID was just hitting. This is really difficult. Okay, let's sit down. What are our deliverables over 6 months? All right, okay. Of these, what are our deliverables in the next 3 months? Okay, let's start doing some planning for that. Right, let's now have a 2-week plan, do, review cycle. And let's have a check-in meeting every 3 days between the project manager and the partner. And he turned it around. And one of the reasons it turned around is because if you meet every month, all of those problems have built up. So you've just got this long meeting talking about problems. It's really hard to gel if you spend an hour talking about problems. Well, if you meet, it's really quick, every 2-3 days, the problems get dealt with quickly and it's much lighter touch. And because there is more contact, it's also easier to develop a relationship. And all too often, I think, in our sector, the INGO local partner relationship feels a bit like the police. And that's, the very opposite of what it should be. The word partner implies some kind of equality, but if when we meet, all we do, we talk about problems, it's really difficult. So I think having these light touch check-ins and a focus on what needs to get done and getting agreement on that in the next 2 weeks, and then monitoring that, reviewing, and then rather than saying, oh, well, we've missed it, so we'll just work harder the next 2 weeks, and then you miss it again, then they started to say, well, okay, do we really need to do this? Is this absolutely, is it a priority? Can it wait? Can it be taken off the list? Or we need some more resources. Otherwise, this won't, everybody's working hard. We can't hit this delivery schedule. We need some more resources. And so they were able to start having quite proactive and productive conversations much earlier in the process, which meant the partner felt that they were being helped and supported, and then delivery improved, and so then it becomes like a virtuous cycle. So that's a little story about how applying some of these ideas can help. And then the question is, do you need to apply all of it? No, of course not. Maybe in the perfect world, great. But I think it's about taking elements, and I've mentioned some of the elements of Agile, and as you go through this, there's quite a lot of learning on Agile project management in the process. And it's taking stuff that you find and think, okay, this bit really speaks to me. I'm going to work out how to apply this in my context. And that's fantastic. That's great. And then it will work or not. And if it doesn't work, you can either stop doing it or work out how to change it and modify it. And if it does work, fantastic. Then you can do more of it and build on that and introduce something else. And that's my advice, not just on Agile, but on pretty much anything when it comes to applying the different ideas and tools. Anyway, I do hope that was helpful. Do keep your comments coming. I look forward to seeing comments in Curator or email me. I'm always very happy to help. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you in the course itself.